Good evening, everybody. Really appreciate everybody coming tonight. This is obviously a special occasion, made even more special by a number of wonderful people who've come tonight. The purpose of this event is to raise funds for two extraordinary organizations. One is Eastside Academy, and the other is Jubilee Reach. We have a representative of both, Aaron from Eastside Academy and Randy from Jubilee Reach. These organizations were picked mainly because of my challenging childhood. I was voted the least likely to succeed and the most likely to enter Her Majesty's Penitentiary. And I accepted that challenge very gracefully. And one of the aspects of my early childhood was punishment. And I brought with me the type of cane that was used to punish me. And one of the challenges with that, I asked them why they were caning me. And they said, to stop you doing it again. And I said, this is the fourth time I've come here this week. It's obviously not working. Which got me another 6 swats with it. So this is the cane, so anybody can look. And if you want to see me use it on Alex, we'll give a full-scale demonstration.
I know how good judges are picking money.
So this is what has endeared me to these two wonderful organizations, and run by wonderful people who genuinely care, who are the antithesis of everything I experienced when I was young. I had a very, very difficult childhood. But in life, you learn to deal with things. Sometimes you have to be a samurai sword and put back in the fire over and over again to make you stronger. And both those two organizations help many, many young people get through very, very difficult times. So again, Randy and Aaron, thanks very much for coming, and really appreciate working with you and working with all the students. So tonight, rather than read from the book, which is rather pedantic, I thought I would tell you a couple of stories. One that happened with one of my late turnarounds, and the other is a postscript from one of those turnarounds. So the first one was a company I acquired in Belgium, which to say was foolhardy was an understatement. This company hadn't made a profit in 9 years, and it was owned by a larger company, Fabrique Nationale. And when I went to the board of directors, I said, I want to buy the company. And they showed me this chart. And it had that they were going to lose $1 million this year. And they were going to break even the following year. And the following year, they'd make $1 million, $2 million. And I said, what's wrong with that? They said, unfortunately, they've used the same chart for the last 9 years. So I bought the company, and it was predominant language was French, but there was also an unintelligible language, Flemish. And once I started digging into the company to do the turnaround, I found out I had 2 unions. Not one, 2. And one was Catholic, and one was Protestant. They hated each other, and they hated me a little bit more. So you'll read a little bit about it in the book. But the purpose of this story is basically to show that even the toughest adversaries, you can find some common ground. So I had a wonderful assistant. Her name was Annalise. She spoke 6 languages fluently, which is very helpful. And I summoned her to find the best restaurant in Liège, in Belgium. I said, I don't care what it costs. Bribe, do whatever you have to do, we're going to get into this restaurant. And you're to invite the 2 union leaders and not tell them that the other one is coming. So I sat in the corner, got there a little early, and I saw them both march in and look at each other and almost turn around and walk back out. And I said, let me explain something. The worst that can happen tonight is you have a wonderful meal, and the wine list, anything on the wine list, you can choose. Wine that you've dreamt about tasting, I will buy. And so there was a little huddle, and they started, they're both wine aficionados, I'd heard. So they go through the wine list. And there was a discussion of whether 68 was better than 72, whether the weather was sunny, or the soil. And they started this long discussion. And they came up with a wine right at the bottom of the list, the ones where the really expensive ones are. And it turned out to be a Petrus 75. And we ordered it, and I don't think anybody had ever ordered a Petrus in that restaurant before. So we had the maitre d', the manager, the sommelier, his assistant. It was like a religious experience when they opened it up and they decanted it and they smelled it and they swooned and eventually handed me the wine, handed us all the wine. And the wine disappeared and the dinner disappeared, and we ordered a second bottle. And in those days, the wine was about probably $3,000 to $4,000 a bottle. So fairly expensive. And so they agreed, and they asked me what I was looking to do with the company. And I told them that their contract was terrible. They were way underpaying the employees. And they stood up. What do you mean? We're the union. You can't underpay. I said, yes, you're not paying them enough. And so I said, we're bringing in your equipment, and you're going to be able to, we need to increase the wages on the shop floor. And they said, won't that be dangerous to the company? And I said, no, it'll actually be dangerous to our competitors because they're not bringing in your equipment, and we'll absolutely take them to the wall, which we did. So developed a wonderful relationship with the union. They supported everything we did. They eliminated absenteeism and turned out to be wonderful friends. And they had boxes at Liège Football Club, which they had on opposite sides of the field, not surprisingly. And we became good, fast friends. So I thought tonight, Alex, if you could pass me that. Don't drop it. Could you take it out?
This is nerve-wracking. When you see the label, you realize why.
Oh my gosh.
So here is a bottle of Petrus 75 to remind me that even the toughest adversaries, you can find a point that they both agree on. So that's the first story. And Alex is going to tell me if I overstay my welcome. But the second story is a postscript. So I bought a company in Scotland, and this company was the worst company I'd ever seen. And I thought I couldn't be happier. I had no ability to make it worse. Whatever I did, I could make it better. And they had a really tyrannical person who ran the company. His name was Robert Tennant. And he used to terrify the employees. And in that time in Scotland, the unemployment was 18%. And so he would terrify the employees. And he would hand out pay slips, you were reading in the book, and if he walked by your station, it meant you'd been fired. And then he would turn around and walk back and say, this week you're okay. So not the nicest person. And so anyway, we managed to get rid of Mr. Tennant. I brought him into my conference room, and I said, Mr. Tennant, there's only two things I want you to do. The first thing is put your credit cards and your car keys, the company car, on the table. And the second thing is I want you to stand up and look out the window and tell me what you see. And he stood up. He said, I see a taxi. I said, take it. And luckily, being an ex-rugby player, he thought twice about any physical violence. And he said, I want to say goodbye to the employees. And I said, you will hear their goodbye, their cheers as you leave in the taxi. So that was Mr. Tennant resolved. Anyway, I got the company turned around, and wonderful, wonderful employees. You'll read a lot about it in the book, how they brought all the pieces together. And I came back to America feeling that I was just king. I'm just so clever. And then I got a call. And our biggest customer was digital equipment. And digital equipment represented 50% of our business. Before I bought the company, I checked that they were going to continue business with us. So this guy summoned me back to Scotland, and I said, why? He said, you need to go back to Scotland. So when I got back there, he said, I didn't want to tell you, but we've actually cancelled all your contracts. We're going to take a 12 million pound company, about a $15 million company, and cut it in half. And I said, why? He said, we've subcontracted it all to South Korea, and we didn't want to tell you in case you didn't buy the company. And so I was devastated. I just thought, and here just a few months ago, I thought I was really clever, and now I was kind of desperate. So I went back to the company and said, look, we got to batten down the hatches. I know there's unemployment. And the wonderful new manager I had, Archie Smith, said, don't worry. We'll produce a 10% profit for you like we guaranteed. We'll share the jobs. We'll set up a food bank. We'll take care of everybody. And don't worry. Just go back to America and we'll take care of it. So I went back to America, and here, obviously back to America, yes. So about 2 months later, I got a call. Here was this gentleman from Maynard, Massachusetts, from Digital Equipment, head of procurement. And he said, Mike, I'd like to meet you in Scotland. And I said, you probably didn't know, but Digital Equipment is not my favorite person, and I'm not prepared to go anywhere. He said, please come back. So I went back to Scotland, and he showed me the room where their previous procurement people were. It was empty. And then I said, what's happening? He said, well, we have 11 ships full of containers with equipment in it, and with these computer boxes that we made, and they're corroding, the paintwork is fading. Would you be willing to do a time and materials contract to repair basically 6 shiploads of this product? And he said, you can just send us an invoice. I saw how you're treated before. This is not how Digital Equipment treats people. And don't even itemize the bill. Just send me a monthly bill for all the labor hours that you put in. And so the first sort of thought came to mind was part of Rudyard Kipling's If, and I'll paraphrase it, that success and failure, you need to treat those two imposters just the same. Thank you. Yours what?
Mike, you might guess, is my cousin. The clues in the name Dunlop. Just to give you some backstory, he asked me to interview him for his podcast, and I think he wanted someone who might be a bit acerbic. He would say cynical, I'd say skeptical, because I think as a journalist, as a BBC journalist, my job is to approach with a degree of skepticism. The only thing that's worrying me about tonight is wretched cane. I just want to set the record straight. You saw him flourish the cane. I'm the one who had to go to Customs and Immigration at SeaTac Airport and explain why there was an instrument of torture in my bag. And I'm the one who has to go back to the BBC, because I'm a BBC correspondent, and have to explain my internet search history. But that's by the by. The good news is that Mike's second prop is the Chateau Petrus, 75, which he flourished. The good news is that there are 17 more bottles backstage, which we all get to taste after this. Just kidding.
And we've decided to put that on the BBC budget because they're government run.
The other thing is, I'm not going to rise to the bait. By the way, this podcast, this has been videoed, and this will come with subtitles for those of you who don't quite understand. But quite seriously though, in TV news, the first thing we're taught as journalists is no matter how good the subject matter, you've got to be able to tell the story. You've got to tell the story to the viewer or to the listener. And I'm no financial journalist. I'll put my cards on the table here. I'm not a business journalist. I'm not a financial journalist. But when I read this book, when Mike asked me to read the book a year ago, it is actually a damn good read. Because Mike, as you can see now, is a remarkably good storyteller. But the story itself is not enough. You've got to be able to back the story up with facts. So the story has got to have a reason, doesn't it? It's got to have a purpose behind the story. And in this book, as I found out, there's this wonderful symbiosis between the subject matter, the art of turning around businesses, and the storytelling itself. And this book is absolutely bristling with stories which are entertaining, but they do have a real purpose, and we'll probably just dive into that. Now, what Mike and I have done is we're just going to set aside the next 4 hours to dive in. Right, you've seen
we have plenty of alcohol in the bar in case anyone wants to take a quick nap halfway through.
You've seen through. We're actually going to provide breakfast. No, but quite seriously, if you want to deep dive into the book, there is the podcast that goes with it, which is on YouTube,
Spotify, YouTube, and also on TikTok. And towards the end, I'm trying to learn a dance. So apparently in TikTok, you have to do a dance as well as your pronouncements. So I put my dancing shoes on today.
The main point is, yes, you can go to the podcast, you can go to Spotify. But the main thing is just go to the primary source, which is what journalists do, go to the book. And the other factor is what we in journalism call the KISS factor. The acronym being keep it simple, stupid. And Mike has kept it simple.
And he's not stupid.
Not stupid, but he's kept it simple, and that is another thing. If you can keep it simple, you engage the audience, and that really is a skill in itself. Keep it simple, tell a good story, it's all there. And as I say, I'm not into business, but it was a great read. What we're going to do is Mike and we won't do a 3-hour Q&A, we'll do it like 15, 20-minute Q&A, but I think that's really just to whet your appetite so that you can ask the challenging questions. We can have the chat, but it's just to set you up with, why the hell didn't Alex ask that idiot? That'll be your chance. The one thing that really hit me with this book, apart from the price, is before I even opened it, the art of the turnaround. Why is it an art?
That's a very piercing question for the first one. You're supposed to give me an easy one. It really is an art. You're dealing with people, and you're dealing with people's emotions, and you're dealing with a group of individuals. And I've said many times, there's no such thing as a good company. They don't exist. Companies don't exist. They're a name given to a group of people who wish to work together. And sometimes the people who run them are good, and it becomes a good company. And sometimes they're absolutely terrible, and it becomes a terrible company. So the art is the finesse, a judo finesse. You take people's effort to take them in the direction that you want them to go. It's not combative. It is seduction. It is getting them to do the things that you want. So part of the trick is when you come into a company, you have to establish leadership. And I won't go through all 10 chapters because we'll be here for breakfast, but on the leadership chapter, how do you become a leader? Well, the first analysis of being a leader is turn around, and if there's no one following you, you're not a leader. So that's the very first definition. Just have a peek over your shoulder, and if there's no one there, you're not leading anybody. So how do you establish leadership? It's presence, it's purpose, it's likability, it's a mission, it's a vision, and it's presenting all those to a brand new audience. And that was the genuine art. And when I first did it, I didn't do it very well. I was just like a financial chainsaw. I thought I could just go through these companies and just chop them up and put them back together again, everybody be happy. And I did it over a 17-year period, 34 companies in 17 years. And I got better and better. And then suddenly I realized it was an art form. It's an art form to take something that is depressed, financially disastrous. Everybody in that company is depressed as an individual. There is no future. They're waiting for the next shoe to drop. They're waiting for the next supplier to stop shipments. And you have a very depressed environment. So part of the art also is bringing the joy back to the business, the future, and what it's going to look like. So you have to create a vision, a visionary, and explain how enjoyable the future is going to be.
But you're an outsider. How on earth do you get them to follow you as the leader? They'll probably see you as an interloper.
That's part of the art. It's not easy. And
I think companies, Mike, which was the scariest to turn around?
I think the one in Belgium, that was until we got the breakthrough, but I don't know, between the Scottish one and the Belgian one, the Scottish company was so dysfunctional and they'd been treated so badly, it took quite a while to establish trust in what you were going to do. So I would say probably the Scottish company was one of the most difficult.
Why is it, I'm looking at the cover, it says a comprehensive 10-step guide. Why 10 steps? It could have been 5, 10, 20. Why 10? It just seems a bit convenient.
When my editor edited the books, I had a wonderful editor back in New York. And I sent the manuscript to the editor. And she sent back 400 recommendations to improve the book. And I was outraged. I said, how dare you? This is my book. It's wonderful. It's my child. And so I went through all these recommendations and I started implementing them and started tying them all together. And then eventually, after doing all that, it started to evolve. And initially I had 20 steps. And my editor said, you're nuts. That's way too long a journey. You need to shorten it up a bit. So I shortened it up to 10 steps. Yeah, yes, just exactly like Moses coming down from the mountain with my... and the sort of 10 commandments to turn a company around. I didn't think about that, but that should have been on their 10 commandments, a picture of... But so the editor played an extraordinary, wonderful part, and I can't thank Maria enough. Again, she made me rewrite one section 8 times. And all her comment was, I think it's getting better, but you need to redo it.
I think one question the editor would ask is, why write this book now? Why is there a need for it now? 15 years ago, perhaps, but why now?
Well, I had the unique opportunity with one of the people in the room here who requested that I visit their company in Eastern Washington. And I went over there, and there were lots of challenges. And suddenly I realized everything that I put together in the previous turnarounds was perfectly applicable 30 years later. And I thought there's some magic here. And so I started writing down some of the things that I had learned over the years and saw how, without being conceited, how effective they were and how they changed the spirit in the company and how everybody reacted differently when we started implementing the changes. So one of the parts of the title is how to bring enjoyment back to a company. And if people enjoy working in a company, they do extraordinarily well. They really support the mission. And I'm lucky enough to have a significant number of my wonderful employees in here. And they've contributed to help building my software company into one of the leaders in the world in terms of quality software. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. And they have, but hopefully we create enjoyment in the company. And particularly if we have events like this with alcohol, they feel a lot better afterwards.
Were there any companies you couldn't turn around?
Yes, I had a couple that were DOA, dead on arrival.
Sorry, that's an important qualification. Did you go in to try to turn them around?
No.
Or did you do a triage and realize that that was not a company, it was a corpse?
And I didn't like the people. And I didn't like the people who were going to benefit from the turnaround. So I triaged it in a number of different ways. I only wanted to work with the companies that I felt had a great potential in the future, not just put a Band-Aid on, but had a long-term future, and that I liked the people. And but I did a very detailed forensic accounting on all these companies, and some were just in terrible shape. I mean, one of the companies I had found out that they had lied about $10 million of inventory. And I did the inventory on the first warehouse, and rather naively, I asked them, I needed to visit the second warehouse, and they said, we only have one warehouse. And I said, well, that's a different type of problem. And so that was a very interesting one, because I asked, one of the first things I always do is go through the list of employees, and I ask them to meet all the employees. This is probably a little indelicate subject, but I will continue because it's funny. So this particular principal had his own private entourage that apparently didn't come to work, had apartments and expenses and salaries, and apparently were just in the sort of marketing department. And so when they came in, I said, what do you do? And they said, we're marketing. And why are we here? And I said, well, I'm checking on all the employees. And as I put in the book, when I'd gone through all the employees, this was the only group that I felt that was significantly underpaid for the work that they were doing. So a lot of different situations.
Okay, I don't want to be part of the awkward squad. Far be it from me to ask this, but you keep on talking about companies. You don't think companies exist. There's no such thing as a company, or?
No, it's a name given to a group of people who agree to work together. The company doesn't exist. So I have a wonderful aerospace giant in Seattle, and I had a number of months ago, I had an employee come in and say, Boeing's not happy with you. And I said, that's very sad. I said, why don't you bring Boeing in and I'll see whether I can cheer them up. And they use it as to avoid accountability. So who is it in Boeing who's not happy? Boeing doesn't exist. It's a name given to a group of people. So that is a shield that people use when they say, well, Boeing wants you to do this. And Boeing doesn't exist. So it's a very interesting phenomenon when you really look at it. And companies, really good companies, are companies that bond together for many years because they want to stay together. And it's not a top-down process. So that's one of the challenges that our friends at Boeing are having right now. And hopefully they'll get them resolved. This is part of the challenge with corporate America, that they have depersonalized the individuals and give it a corporate moniker that really has no basis in reality at all.
So when you turn around a company, I guess it's key to read the room. It's about the people, not just about the spreadsheets.
Yeah, it's stunning when you have your first employee meetings and you scan the room. The very first thing is where they sit. And the power person sits one seat away from you on the right. They don't sit next to you because that makes it look like a toady. They are close enough to influence, and they always seem to sit on the right. And so there were a number of characteristics when people came into the room. Were they smiling? Did they bring a notebook to write down what they were doing, what I was talking about? Did they ask questions? Did they respond to questions? And it was incredible how quickly you could identify who was who. So in any company, there's 20% Marines, and show them the wall and they'll go through it. Don't know how, but they're going to go through the wall. Then you have 60% in the middle who are not quite sure. And then you have another 20% of outright industrial terrorists. And they're trying to recruit the ones in the middle. And so you have to exercise the industrial terrorists. And luckily, they identify themselves almost immediately. The company can't be repaired, nothing we can do, whole thing is going to go bankrupt, we're all going to do this, and fine, I just put a little tick by their name. And when we do the staff reductions, guess they volunteered for that reduction. So that was part of it. And then the group in the middle, when they see the 20% at the top, the Marines, they start identifying with them, because you've got rid of the cancer, you've got rid of the corrosive element in the company. So I was fairly direct and fairly quick to remove any of these people who were going to destroy, not me, but destroy the company.
And is it the same template for all companies that you turn around? Because you mainly were turning around manufacturing companies. Is there a similar leitmotif for all the companies that you turn around?
Almost exactly. I mean, I did a restaurant chain. I did 3 or 4 retail chains. I did a number of manufacturing companies, but probably one of the most interesting was a law firm. And if you want to have a perfect definition of anarchy, it's a law firm. They're all partners, they're all in charge, and no one's in charge. And they decide to divvy up the profits based on some obscure formula, and some actually demand that they get their money up front because they raise their living standards, so they have partnership distributions on a monthly basis rather than waiting to the end of the year to see how much money they have. So because they haven't got the money, because they can't collect their bills because no one wants to pay them, they borrow the money from the bank. And so eventually they run out of money. So this fairly large law firm ran out of money. And so that was a very interesting one, because you're not dealing with any hierarchy. No one's senior to anybody else. Everybody's a partner. So that required a little bit of different psychology.
And what's interesting is you talk about these 3 pillars when it comes to turning around a company. It sounds like, this is the 3-legged stool that's so crucial: the pursuit of happiness, the elimination of constraints, and mentorship. And I think those from the outside would say, well, the pursuit of happiness when it comes to turning around a company, although it's really, really brutal, how can people who are being kicked out of their jobs, the terrorists or whoever, those who aren't needed, they're going to be far from happy?
Well, it's the pursuit of happiness. It's not to make people happy. So it's a process. And in order to have people survive, you have to triage. And it's not what you'd like to have in terms of number of employees, it's what you can afford. And you have to then take what you can afford that helps the company survive and select the people who could participate and contribute best in the company. And it is harsh and it's brutal, but the pursuit of happiness is very different from making you happy. In the preamble to the Constitution, the famous philosopher John Locke, who came from England, felt people had an inalienable right to be happy, and that they had the right to pursue that happiness, and no one should get in the way of that pursuit. And in a company, that's what you have to try and create, that philosophy that to pursue happiness. Not that you might never be happy, but the journey is the one that is so beneficial. On the other one, the mentorship, I've had some wonderful mentors, and I'm lucky enough to see from this podium one of the most wonderful people I've met in America, who, when I very first started my first business in 1973, was kind enough to see me, and was unbelievably kind, and had just started a new accounting practice in Bellevue that is still thriving today, and that's Bob Neuber. And so this kind person sent me on my way and acted as a mentor, encourager, and so that was a real key. The elimination of constraints is actually quite simple. Most constraints are perceived, they're not actual. So someone says, I can't do this, I'm not qualified. I can't start this company because I can't raise capital. And so there are a lot of reasons not to do things. So when you remove the constraints, suddenly people start to do things that they never thought they were capable of doing. So the elimination of constraints was important. And there was a fourth one that we added a little later, which I think is the most important one, and that is stewardship. And stewardship is that you don't own a company. You're basically the steward of that company for a while, and when you die, you hand it off to someone else. So your responsibility is to take care of it as best you can. And I found, and you read in the book, a company that in Japan that started in 762, a hotel and a spa, and is still run by the same family. Hopefully they've upgraded the furniture a little bit since then, but it's still very popular. It's still in the same family, and that is an example of stewardship. And I'm trying to teach more business owners that your obligation to society is stewardship. You're not an owner, because when you die, you don't own it any longer. And if you can keep the company and treat it properly, have a proper succession plan with like-minded people, then you continue the journey. And so I'm starting to really emphasize more stewardship and taking care of your employees, your company, your suppliers, your customers, and your entire ecosystem that you work in. If you take care of that, they will certainly take care of you.
And just two quick ones from me before we open up to the floor. I think for me the most vivid chapter was entitled Burning the Boats a la Cortez, which I think is a really crucial turnaround. Just briefly explain that before we wind up.
So when you turn a company around, you stretch it. You stretch it to a point where it doesn't look like it did before. And it's elastic. And there's a great temptation for it to bounce back to where it was comfortable, because you've actually stretched it and made it uncomfortable. So how do you make sure the mission continues? Well, I did some research and I found this wonderful gentleman called Cortez that came from Spain and invaded Mexico, and his troops kept on grumbling about when they were going to go home. And he said, look at the horizon. And they said, OMG, which they say these days. They looked at the horizon and all the ships were on fire. And he said, that's your answer. We're not going back. We're staying here. You're going to be with me because we're not going back. And so when you turn a company around, you must put in place the inability for it to go back to where it was, which is a great temptation. So I didn't really have any ships to burn with these companies, but I put in there places where it made it almost impossible to go back. So that was the Cortez chapter, burning the ships. I always thought it was nice and dramatic. I think I would have been a kind of Cortez, but
hence the phrase "burn your boats." We've burned our boats here. Now I've asked the easy questions. I'm really depending on you guys to give him a hard time because Mike loves the challenge. So if we can hand the mic around the room, and probably the mic that you're holding actually, Mike.
So how am I going to answer if my microphone's
got a microphone on you?
But it doesn't work.
Okay. I think
do we have a second mic?
While Kate hands the mic out, I'm sure we'll work that out. Hands up, anyone who wants to, only if it's a challenging one, right? Excellent. So Kate, if we could pass it right to the back row, if that's okay.
I've been told I have to shout because my microphone's not working.
That'll come easily enough, right? Okay.
So what key principles do you think in the art of the turnaround are most often overlooked by leaders, and why?
Maybe just bring the microphone. Oh, it's working. Wow.
Yeah.
So leadership is critical. It's the foundation. So if you don't establish leadership immediately, and again, the definition of leadership is people following you. So if people are not coalescing behind your leadership, you need to review what you're doing. Because leadership is people voluntarily following. Yes, you can force them, you can threaten them, you can coerce them, but that doesn't last. So a true leader has people who believe in their vision, and they do things that make people's lives better. So one of my recommendations to our friends at Boeing, to their top 5 people, I said, get a conference room on the shop floor in Renton and get 1 aide each, so none of all this middle management. And every morning, with your aide, walk the floor and stop people and ask how you can help. And if they say, I can't do my job because I don't have the right torque wrench, you're the CEO or senior manager, say to the aide, I want to have a torque wrench to this guy by lunchtime. And you do it for 2 or 3 months. You eliminate all the adversarial aspects. You're treated as the person who is leading and helping them. And unless you establish that connection, it doesn't matter what you do. So it's really establishing a genuine likability for the person. People normally follow people they like.
Any other questions?
Next question.
Good. Gentleman in red, and then we'll work our way to the front side.
This is someone I know. This is going to be a zinger.
So first of all, I've had the opportunity of working with Mike, and I got to tell you that he is brilliant, and the book is amazing. I think one of the most interesting things for me was having been involved in businesses for a number of years, is talk to your employees and the richness that you can get. You know, there was always a fear of if you talk to your employees, you're going to get all this bad stuff, right? And you don't know what to do with it. But listening to employees is pretty amazing, and what they come up with and how they can really help the company because they see everything. So, but the question, you know, is in terms of leadership. Just curious on your thoughts in terms of the CEO of the organization and how impactful that one person is to the organization.
Yeah, they're absolutely vital. And the one thing they must have is vision. And many years ago, when George Bush Sr. was running for re-election, the aides came to him and said, "Sir, you know, we don't really have a vision. We don't have one of those vision things." And George Bush said, "Well, then you need to go out and get one for me." If you have to ask someone to go and get a vision thing for you, it's kind of missing the point. And so you have to have the vision, and you have to have it viscerally, and you have to leave absolutely no doubt that it's going to occur. And you have to draw the picture, and you have to show the vision, and you have to almost have your employees visiting the future. And once they see what can be done, they naturally gravitate towards it. But most CEOs don't bother to communicate the passion. They don't bother to communicate the excitement. They don't bother to communicate the enjoyment. And they look at it as quasi-adversarial. So leadership is something that's earned, and it's not a title. It's something that coalesces where you create a joint vision with your employees, and they want to take that journey with you. And so it's actually relatively, once you've established that, you have a momentum with your employees who want to do what you want them to do, exactly like in judo. I don't know how many of you understand about judo, but you never push back in judo. You wait till the other person pushes, and then you use that momentum to take them where you want them to go. So that's very classic leadership is judo leadership. You don't push back. You see where they want to go and you encourage them to go there.
Gentlemen, I think towards the front, sir. Yeah, please go right to the front row here. Thanks for your patience.
Michael, I certainly admire you. I was going to nominate you the next St. Thomas More, a man for all seasons. But you have no degree in finance. You're not a PhD in economics. You don't have a management degree. Where in God's name did you gain the credentials to become a consultant to these companies when you have none of that knowledge?
That's a very good question.
None of the acquired knowledge.
I'm actually totally unqualified to do anything. That's why when I was 25, I got fired from my first job in America, and I did something that I shouldn't have done. I thought it was good, but I hadn't got permission. And by the time I was 25, I was free. And one of the things about freedom, when you work on your own, you can do whatever you want. You can be whatever you want. Now, obviously, a brain surgeon, an amateur brain surgeon, is probably not a good idea. It's probably good to go to some formal education there. Even with the internet, you can learn a lot about how to be a brain surgeon, but it's probably not a good idea. But other things that are more common sense, like finance, companies, it's addition and subtraction. The only multiplication you have is in the invoice. So these are skills you should have got fully mastered by the time you leave kindergarten. And somehow we make it out to be this extraordinary complex thing. And it's not. So simplifying things, bringing them back to simple principles, and you'll be amazed at what people allow you to do. When I had one of the larger companies in Portland, Oregon, I had $300,000 in the bank. And I needed about 10.8 million. That's quite a stretch. And so I decided I was going to do that. So I put together a proposal to a bank, to KeyBank, and they turned me down. And so I was depressed a little bit. I thought it was a great proposal. But I asked them, what didn't they like in the proposal? And they told me. So in the next proposal to the next bank, I incorporated their objections. Well, it didn't happen quite as fast as I thought it would, because now I was up to the 30th bank and found a bank in Minnesota, of all places. And it was called Norwest Bank. And they came out to see me in Portland. We're in the conference room, and here were 5 or 6 earnest MBAs who were doing all their due diligence. And by sheer luck, the president of the bank did 1 sales call a month, and he chose mine. And he sat there looking bored where all these MBAs were asking due diligence questions. And he said, Mike, take me to the plant, which was 60,000 square feet of emptiness. We'd done the office, but we hadn't started bringing in the equipment. And so I rolled out the architect's drawings of where all the equipment was going to go. And I was initially looking actually for only 2 million. And he took me to one side and said, nowhere near enough. You need to have 8.8, and I'll do a mezzanine line of 2 million. And we went back into the conference room, and he told the earnest MBAs that Mike is staying at the Benson Hotel tonight. Take him out to dinner. And I want a proposal on my desk tomorrow morning. We've accepted Mike's offer. So when people tell me, yes, it's difficult to raise capital, it is. But sometimes you just got to keep going. And I think that's the qualification conundrum, is that funnels people into thinking that that's all they have the capability. And people have way, way more capability, but they're funneled into a section. So I'll finish with one, very quick anecdote. The company I took over in Belgium, I asked some complex production questions. We'd been late with every order we'd shipped to Airbus. They were close to canceling the contract, which was the bulk of our business. And someone calling? So we were late on every contract. So I had a glass office, and I looked out over this vast array of people, and I asked a question. And right in front of me, I saw it go ping pong across the room. This person asked this person, this person. Right at the end was this young clerical lady, and she went on the computer and came the answer, and then it bounced all the way back. So I thought, well, I'll watch that one more time. So I said, who's the person at the other end? Oh, she's just a clerical person. I said, what's her name? Miriam. I said, bring Miriam to my office. So I said, Miriam, you appear to know all the answers. And she said, yes, because I know how to use the computer. I said, you're now production manager. And we'll take your salary from 15 to 50, and you'll now work directly with me. And she was 5'2", and absolutely the fiercest woman I've ever met. And I still have this vision of looking out over the factory floor with some great big 300-pound lug with a finger like this and him backing towards the machine. They were terrified of her. But after 1 month, we didn't have a single late shipment to any of our customers. And so Miriam was a clerical person, but she had extraordinary talent. The other lucky part was that she was an au pair in England when she was younger and spoke English fluently, so finally I got someone I could speak to. So anyway, so you'll find a lot of these stories in the book. I'd be very interested in your feedback. It's quite risky, as my daughter will tell you, who is a published author. You put it out there and you kind of pray because you have no idea whether people say, you gotta be kidding, or will like it. So I want your honest appraisal. If I need to burn the 4,000 copies that are in the garage, that's fine. It will be a great, sorry?
You have to save the garage.
Well, no, we have an extra one here. So I think we'll wrap it up there. There's a lot more food, there's more drink, and then if anybody would like to visit the floor, I think Will and Jake will take people down in groups of 10, and then as a special treat, you can pick the car that you'd like to take home. So, again.
Yes, for every book you get a free car.
So there's a signed copy for everybody to take home. And I greatly appreciate your coming. I hope you've been suitably entertained. And that was why you got served alcohol beforehand.